This is Fiona Obanda from Kenya, and on behalf of Team G, I'm here to affirm the topic that African countries should prioritize genetic research into diseases prevalent on the continent over global collaborative research initiatives. Genetic research is essential for understanding and managing diseases prevalent on the continent. However, addressing these challenges requires both local genetic research and global collaboration. And when we prioritize African genetic research over global collaboration, African genetic data and also its communities will be protected. And also the healthcare system and the healthcare systems will be improved and bring about economic growth. Moving forward, let's define some key terms. Genetic research is the study of genes and their roles in health, disease, and heredity, and they are used to develop targeted treatments and preventive strategies. Global collaborative research, these are scientific studies conducted across multiple countries, pooling resources, expertise, and data to address complex health challenges. Diseases prevalent on the African continent, these are health conditions that are widespread in Africa, and they may be influenced by environmental, genetic, and also healthcare access factors. Moving forward, historically, African populations have been underrepresented in genomic studies despite having the highest genetic diversity. And hence, it has led to misdiagnosis, ineffective treatments, and also lack of medical solutions that are particularly made for Africans. When we focus on local investment, research will be strengthened, healthcare systems will be developed, innovation will be brought, and also data ownership will be improved. However, global collaboration brings funding, technology, and expertise that African can use, but it doesn't mean it should be prioritized over the locals' health priorities. And a good example of such a project is the H3 Africa, which proved that when Africa takes the lead in genetic research, it produces groundbreaking discoveries and also strengthens its healthcare system. We argue that when we prioritize African genetic data, when we prioritize African genetic research, African genetic data and also its communities will be protected. This is because Africa has faced historical exploitation in genetic research, where foreign researchers collected data without proper informed consent. And a good example is the Luo DNA case, where genetic samples were taken without full disclosure. African-led research will ensure ethical oversight, where studies will be particularly made and prioritized for African in order to benefit them rather than the external interests. Also, stronger ethics review boards and data protection laws will prevent exploitation and enforce ethical compliance. Moving forward, we argue that African governments should have self-funded genetic research in order to avoid political shifts, in order to avoid research programs being disrupted from political shifts from our stakeholders, who are actually the foreign funders. Moving forward, we also argue that when we prioritize African research, genetic research, African-led governance in genetics will be strengthened. This is because Africa must develop. This is because many African countries lack comprehensive laws on genetic research, which makes them vulnerable to data exploitation and unethical collaborations. Also, regional research regulatory bodies should be implemented in order to set standardized policies on data ownership and privacy, bring about informed consent, and benefit sharing. Again, we argue that we should prioritize African research over global collaborations because these collaborations usually benefit foreign institutions more than Africa itself. And a good example is from the USAID restructuring, where aid should only align with the US geopolitical interests rather than focusing on global health priorities. Moving forward, This is why African governments should enforce stronger policies that prioritize local research and ensure data sovereignty in any global partnerships. Moving forward, and the most important aspect of this argument are the potential benefits. It will lead to Africa-specific treatments, and a good example is from the South African genomic research, which helped develop HIV treatments, particularly for Africans, improving survival rates. Moving forward, it will bring about economic growth and also create jobs. And a good example is the 54 Gene Research Center, which has contributed to local drug development and diagnostics, reducing reliance on imported technologies. It will also ensure affordable and accessible healthcare systems. Again, it will also ensure self-sufficiency in research and healthcare systems, which will lead to long-term benefits. And this is why Africans should prioritize on genetic research, on its own genetic research, which will in turn ensure continuous progress, job creation, and also improve on biotech industry growth. It was argued that when we focus on global collaborations, it brings about shared scientific knowledge and accelerated discovery. Global collaboration is important, but Africa should focus on its own research to ensure diseases most relevant to us receive adequate attention. Moving forward, it was argued that genetic research is a global issue. But Africans do have a unique genetic variation, which are often underrepresented in global databases. And when we prioritize local research, it will enable making of medical treatments that are only suitable for Africa. Moving forward, it was argued that Africa lacks the funding and infrastructure. But remember, overdependence on foreign aid can limit Africa's research autonomy because many foreign funds focus primarily on their priorities rather than Africa's most urgent health issues. And this is why Africa should invest on its own for sustainable and independent research progress. Moving forward, it was argued that when we focus on our own, it will bring scientific isolation. But countries like India and China have prioritized their own research while still engaging in global science. Africa can do the same. Moving forward, it was argued that Africa faces multiple health challenges. Remember, when we focus on diseases that burden us the most, there will be health improvements, and the success in these areas can serve as foundation for addressing other emerging health issues. And I hereby conclude that we have shown that diseases like sickle cell, HIV, and malaria can continue to affect Africa unequally, and relying on foreign funding and research partnerships will leave Africa vulnerable to external political decisions. And this is why Africa must prioritize self-driven genetic research over dependence on global collaborations, because we have the resources, we have the potential. And by doing this, we will be strengthening ethical guidelines, enforcing regulatory frameworks, and also investing in homegrown talent. The question is no longer whether Africa can take charge. Will we do it? The time to act is now. The following are our references for further reading. Thank you so much. We welcome any further questions.